Hello, everyone. My name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about The Freedom Business, written by Marilyn Nelson. Now, before I go into the summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and/or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. Now, this work is very interesting because it takes a look at slavery, but in a very different context. It looks at slavery through the lens of business, through the lens of making money, and it kind of makes us understand why a lot of people, went into Africa. Especially a lot of Americans, white Americans, went into Africa, in the slave trade and participated in the slave trade, invested into the slave trade, went into Africa, kidnapped a lot of people, and then turned them into slaves. This account gives us, this narrative gives us the story of an individual by the name of Venture Smith. Venture Smith was part of a tribe. He was, a prince. His life was going well. Throughout this work, we get an account of his life as a child, at the age of 6, how his father was a chief, was a leader, was, pretty much a king. And when the slave traders came into Africa, they pretty much took over everything, and everything was destroyed. His father, they had a proud heritage, they had a culture. He goes into detail, or the narrative goes into detail about his life and his father, and how his father had 3 wives, and how his father had kids by these wives, and different conflicts that occurred between his mother and his father, and pretty much how he kind of had a hard life ever since he was a 6-year-old child. And then not long, he gets kidnapped, and his father dies, trying to protect his people, trying to protect his family. And plus, there's really nothing you can do when you're fighting people with advanced weapons, with weapons that you just couldn't do anything with the weapons that they had. So Venture Smith gets kidnapped. He's put on a ship, and pretty much they sail the sea, and then he comes to America, and we see him in Rhode Island. We see him throughout the narrative, the novel, where he gets sold to different masters, to different individuals, to different people, and he learns quickly how to gain loyalty, or how to demonstrate that he's a loyal person, that he's a person that his masters could trust. Now, most slave narratives, most stories that involves oppression, slavery, racism, discrimination, you get the horrors and the trauma of slavery. But in this work, it focuses more on money, on wealth, on power, and we see how Venture Smith starts to make deals with his masters, make money for his masters, start to save a little bit of money for himself so he can buy his own freedom. He gets married to another slave woman, and his children that he has by this woman are also slaves. And then when he gets his freedom, or when he buys his freedom, and it's extremely expensive to buy his freedom, he becomes a free man. Now he saves money by doing odd jobs, working at night, and he works backbreaking jobs to make ends meet, to make money so that he can buy his freedom. And he ultimately buys his freedom because he actually meets a master that's kind enough to allow him to buy his freedom, because most masters during the age of slavery in America wouldn't allow their slaves to buy their freedom. But Venture Smith, he comes upon this one master that says, okay, if you do this, that, and the third, or if you work this amount of time and pay me this amount, I'll let you buy your freedom. And throughout the work, we see that his masters are saying, he's loyal, he's devoted, he'll do what you ask him to do, and that's Venture Smith. He eventually buys his freedom, he buys land, he starts his own farm, and later he buys his wife, he buys his kids, but his life is filled with sorrows, because he buys his freedom in America where slaves were still a thing, and so he didn't have any rights. So when people stole his stuff, took his stuff, took advantage of him, he couldn't really go in front of a court and be represented as well as anybody else. Because frankly, during this time in America, during the slave era in America, if you were black, if you were an African from Africa, you just did everything. Everyone saw you as property, as cattle, as non-human. So we see a lot of bad things happen to him. People take advantage of him. His son dies of scurvy because he kind of like leased or rented his son out to a slave master to work so that he can make money off his son. And his son dies of scurvy. His daughter dies. The only good thing is that his wife lives a very long life, and she's like the joy of his life, and he actually loved her. And it seemed like they had a happy family, or they had a happy relationship. And his life, he actually ends up dying at a very old age. So he has a good life. He ends up buying land and having his own home and having his own property and having his own business, which is extremely significant. And that's the story of Venture Smith. I mean, he lost all his family, he lost all his heritage, he lost everything about him, but he somehow gains it back in a country that's filled with slaves by the end of his story. Now let's talk about what makes this narrative or the story of Venture Smith very fascinating, very interesting. After he gains his freedom, after Venture Smith gains his freedom, he buys other slaves, or he buys people who are not yet freed. So Venture Smith, he buys them, and he buys them with a business mindset. So he's like, okay, I'm gonna buy you. You're gonna work for me, and the wages you earn will come to my pockets. And then if you work hard enough, you can buy your freedom from me. So the freedom business is that, which is very, like, for me, this is mind blowing. Is that Venture Smith pretty much started a business of freedom. He would buy slaves, and then by having them work for him, they would purchase their freedom from him. So the freedom business is really just it's out of when you first think about it and think about what he was doing, he is a businessman. Yes, he was a slave. Yes, he's living in a time of slavery. But Venture Smith, from this perspective, I think he's thinking from a business standpoint. He's like, okay, you have these individuals who are enslaved. I can buy them. I'm free. I can buy them. I can have the proper paperwork. Have them work for me. Have them pay me, and then they can buy their own freedom from me. So it was a business to purchase freedom, which is, you've heard of masters allowing their slaves to be freed, or slaves working extra hours or working even harder to be freed. But you've never heard of a slave or a former slave starting a business of freeing people. But at the same time, what happens is a lot of the slaves that he freed or he bought so that he could free them, they did not see his vision. Pretty much all of them run away, or they don't see his vision, or they don't see that he's like fit to be their master, because they're used to being slaves to white people, and now this black man or this individual from Africa buys them, and he looks similar to them. So why should I listen to this man, or why should I be oppressed by this man? In fact, one of the slaves that he buys, he actually goes back to his former master. And the thing is, like, I don't, when you think about slaves, slaves were broken. So when masters had slaves, they didn't just have them, they broke them. They broke them mind and spirit, so that if the idea of ever being freed or leaving ever came to their minds, they would not. They would stay obedient. They would stay, obedient. I mean, it was a way that a lot of masters used so that slaves wouldn't run away, because they knew if they ran away, or if they didn't serve their master, the circumstances or the consequences would be dire. So Venture Smith learns a lot about that. But the thing is, like, it's not just slaves, his children, his wife, his property. He sees them all in numbers. Like at the end of the narrative or the book, he gives us an account of how much he paid for his wife, how much he paid for his daughters, how much he paid for his son, how much he paid for everything, and what deficits he encountered, what gains he encountered. So Venture Smith, yes, he was a slave. Yes, he was kidnapped from Africa. Yes, he lost his heritage. But Venture Smith is a hands down businessman, and he saw to a way to incorporate, to free people while trying to make money. It just didn't work out well. That's his story, and that's really mind blowing. And I mean, it brings your attention to why so many white individuals went into the slave trade, and went into Africa and kidnapped people because they thought that they could make a lot of money. And from my perspective, money is the root of all evil. With enough money, you will kill people, abuse people, torture people, and commit, an innumerable amount of atrocities. It's just very it's very scary what money can do. And so we see Venture Smith. He sees the world that he lives in. He sees where he's at by the end of the narrative, and he takes it upon himself to free people, but at the same time make himself very wealthy. And he does become very wealthy by the end. He's becomes an owner of a lot of land. But I mean, the thing is, like, what's really sad is that you can kind of compare him to the white masters, because he doesn't end up owning as many slaves as a white master, but I feel like a lot of the white masters at that time, they didn't care about anything else. They just wanted their money. And there's several points where Venture Smith, he really didn't care about anything else. He just wanted his money. I mean, he saw the horrors of slavery. He knew what he had to endure. But at the end of the day, it came to how much wealth and prestige you can amount. When you look at it that way, when you look at it in terms of wealth and power, Venture Smith and these white masters, they had the same mindset. How much money can I make? And I don't care about the consequences. So Venture Smith, there's several points where he was irate, he was angry, he was livid. He just wanted to punish these slaves because they were running away from him and he wasn't making his money. And so from that perspective, from protecting my wealth, protecting my property, you can see how the types of horrific things that wealth and power and money, or the pursuit of money, the horrific things that the pursuit of money can make individuals, the type of things that they can make individuals do. So yeah, that's the story. Really gives us a different perspective of slavery, the business side of it. It doesn't say that of course the horrors, the atrocities will always be there, but this narrative really focuses on the wealth and the greediness of slavery, rather than the horrors of it. And yeah, that's the freedom business. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment, and I'll see you guys in my next video.